My wife slept with my business partner, and now she's claiming half of our $1.2 million estate in a brutal legal battle after I found out she forged my signature to sell our family home. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be the biggest betrayal of my life. It all started with little signs, you know. Small things that I brushed off at first because I didn't want to see the truth. But then came the day I found out everything was a lie, and my world came crashing down in ways I never imagined. Lisa and I had been married for about 10 years. We built a pretty good life. Nice house, decent jobs, a couple of kids. I was running my own business, and she was always the picture-perfect wife in front of everyone. She was sharp, manipulative, and could turn on the charm when needed, but behind closed doors, she was different. I started noticing little things that felt off. Missing money, strange phone calls, late nights she'd never admit to. I told myself she was just stressed, busy with the kids, or maybe just bored. But I knew better. The first real sign that something was wrong came when I saw her phone light up at 2 a.m. with a name I didn't recognize. She quickly snatched it away, acting like she'd just been asleep. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I caught her texting someone and her responses were overly flirtatious. She called him babe in a message. I froze. My stomach sank. I could hardly breathe. I knew then there was someone else. Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. She was more secretive, hiding her phone, lying about her whereabouts, and making excuses that made no sense. I started doing my own digging, going through her emails, her social media messages, and I found what I feared. She'd been sleeping with my business partner, Mark. It was brutal. They'd been at it for months, sneaking around behind my back while I worked late or was out of town on business trips. I remember the moment I found the text messages. She'd sent a picture of herself in bed, wearing nothing but a silk robe with a caption that said, "Can't wait to see you again." My hands shook. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? I looked at the evidence laid out in front of me and realized that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. The woman I thought I knew was a complete stranger sleeping with the guy I trusted the most. That night I confronted her. I was furious, hurt, and utterly betrayed. I told her I knew everything. Her reaction. She told me I was overreacting, that I was just paranoid, that Mark was just a friend who was helping with the business. She called me crazy for even thinking she'd cheat. But I had the messages. I had the proof. She kept lying, spinning some story about how she and Mark were just working on a project, that it was all innocent. Innocent, please. I saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't care that I knew. She was brazen, unapologetic. That hurt worse than anything else. I felt so many emotions all at once. Anger, sadness, betrayal, confusion. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let myself trust her so completely. My mind kept replaying moments, her late nights, her secretive phone calls, the way she'd avoid my gaze. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. How could the woman I loved and trusted so deeply turn out to be capable of such lies? I was angry at her, but mostly I was angry at myself for not noticing the cracks in our marriage before it was too late. That night I stayed up, thinking about what this meant for my life. I had built everything around her, our house, our family, my business. Now it all felt like a house of cards ready to fall. I knew I had to decide what to do next, but right then, all I could feel was this overwhelming sense of loss and rage. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who had no respect for me or our vows. I'd always believed in honesty, loyalty, marriage. What the hell was I supposed to do now? After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept running over the same images. Lisa in bed with Mark, the messages, the betrayal. I felt like I'd been punched again and again, each punch knocking the wind out of me. I knew I couldn't keep going like this, not without some kind of plan. I had to figure out what to do, and I knew I had to act fast. The next morning, I started digging into our finances. I needed to know if she'd been hiding anything else, if she'd taken money, or if she'd done something to jeopardize everything I'd worked so hard for. I pulled out our bank statements, looked through her credit card bills, and what I found made my blood run cold. She'd been draining our accounts, making large withdrawals, and even forging my signature to sell our family home. I couldn't believe it. She was literally trying to take everything we had, our house, our savings, our future. I sat there, stunned. How could she do this? How could she betray me so completely and then try to steal what was ours? I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with proof. I called her at work, told her I knew everything. Her voice was cold, dismissive, like she didn't care about the damage she was causing. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, and that I was ruining everything. That's when I realized her lies had no limit. She was a master manipulator, and I'd been blind to it for so long. I decided I couldn't let her get away with it. I contacted a lawyer, someone I trusted, a guy named David, and told him everything. We drafted a cease and desist letter to stop her from selling or transferring any more assets. I also filed a police report about the forged signature. I knew she was trying to pull some kind of fast one, but I wasn't going to let her steal my life without a fight. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, acting innocent, pretending she was the victim. She called me crazy and insisted she was just trying to help with the kids, that I was overreacting. But I had all the evidence. I had her bank withdrawals, her messages with Mark, and the forged signature. I could see through her lies now. She was a master of deception, but I wasn't going to be her pawn anymore. I was done being the fool. That's when I started planning my next move. I knew I had to get her out of the house, and I had to protect my assets. I also realized I needed to prepare for a legal battle, one that would be brutal. She was claiming she deserved half of everything, including the estate worth over $1 million. She was ruthless, and I knew she'd fight dirty. But I was determined to fight back. I had to protect what was mine, for my kids, for myself. I reached out to a forensic accountant to trace her financial activities, and I hired a private investigator to dig into her whereabouts and her relationship with Mark. I wanted to get ahead of her lies. Meanwhile, I started collecting all the documents, emails, texts, anything that could prove her infidelity and her financial deception. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was smart, manipulative, and incredibly bitchy when cornered. But I was prepared. I'd learned that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, especially when someone is willing to burn everything down just to get what they want. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was crazy for accusing her, and that Mark was just a friend. But I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes, the guilt, the desperation. She was lying through her teeth. And now I was ready to take her down, to make her pay for what she'd done. I didn't want just a divorce. I wanted her to understand that betrayal comes with consequences. I wanted her to feel what it's like to lose everything she thought she could get away with. I'll tell you, the anger is still there, simmering just beneath the surface. But I also feel a strange sense of clarity now. I've realized some things about trust, about who people really are, and about what I deserve. I thought I married a woman I could count on, but she turned out to be someone I'd never really known. And now, I'm fighting to get my life back, piece by piece. After I gathered all the evidence and started making moves, the real chaos began. Lisa's reaction was predictable but still shocking. She flipped into full-blown denial, throwing tantrums, calling me insane, and accusing me of trying to ruin her life. She insisted she was innocent, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. Honestly, it was almost laughable, if it were. So infuriating. She acted like she was the victim, like I was the bad guy for exposing her. But I knew better. I had the proof. The texts, the forged signatures, the bank withdrawals, they all painted a very clear picture. I started preparing for the legal fight. I hired a divorce lawyer, someone who knew how to handle these kinds of cases, the kind where infidelity and financial deception were involved. I also made sure to document every interaction with Lisa from that point on. I didn't want her to spin any more lies or manipulate the situation. I had to cover my bases. The more I dug, the more I discovered how deep her treachery went. She had been secretly working on selling our house, forging my signature. She even tried to transfer our estate into her name. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just cheating on me. She was trying to steal everything we had built. My mind raced, trying to process how someone I loved could become so ruthless. I felt betrayed all over again, but this time I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. I confronted her again, this time with a legal notice in hand. I told her she was not to sell or transfer any assets without my consent. Her face twisted with anger and contempt. She called me paranoid and jealous, said I was just trying to control her. That was the moment I saw her true colors. She was a liar, a manipulator, and a user. She tried to gaslight me, claiming she was innocent and that I was overreacting. But I stood firm. I knew if I didn't act fast, she'd try to wipe me out financially. Meanwhile, I kept my cool with her, but inside I was boiling. I knew I had to be strategic. I contacted the forensic accountant, who uncovered even more suspicious transactions, large cash withdrawals, payments to Mark, and other financial irregularities. I also hired the private investigator, who confirmed that Mark and Lisa had been seeing each other behind my back. Even during business trips, I thought she was working late or with friends. It was a nightmare. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so trusting. I started gathering everything I could: emails, text messages, bank statements, witness statements from friends who suspected something. I wanted to make sure I had all my ducks in a row when the court date came. I knew Lisa was planning to fight dirty, claiming I was an overbearing husband or trying to accuse me of some kind of mental instability. But I refused to let her manipulate the truth anymore. I was done being the victim. I was going to take control of the situation, no matter how brutal it got. I also made the difficult decision to move out of the house. I couldn't stay there with her anymore, not after what she'd done. I needed space to breathe, to think clearly, and to prepare my case. I found a small apartment nearby, and I moved in quietly, keeping everything under wraps. I didn't want her to know my every move because I knew she'd try to sabotage me or spin some story to turn others against me. I had to stay one step ahead. As I packed my things, I reflected on everything I'd lost: trust, stability, the woman I loved. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been naive, believing in marriage as some perfect union. But the truth was, some people will betray you for money, for lust, for whatever sick reason. I learned that the hard way. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours, and I was ready for that fight. I wasn't going down without a battle, not this time. The legal process moved faster than I expected, and Lisa's true colors started to show even more. She was relentless in her accusations, trying to paint herself as the victim, claiming I was turning the kids against her and that I was mentally unstable. She hired her own lawyer, a slick woman named Susan, who seemed more interested in dragging things out than actually resolving anything. I could see right through her tactics: lots of delays, false accusations, and attempts to sway the court with tears and fake outrage. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence. I worked closely with my attorney, providing every message, email, and financial record I had. The forensic accountant uncovered some disturbing things. She'd moved large sums of money into accounts in her name, and Mark had been secretly transferring money from our joint accounts into his own. It was clear they'd been planning this for months. The more I found out, angrier I got. How could she do this? How could she betray me, my family, everything we built, just for a quick fuck and a shot at my estate? The court hearings were brutal. Lisa sat there with her bitchy smirk, trying to look innocent, but I knew better. She was trying to manipulate the system, play the victim, and get half of everything. She claimed I was abusive, that I'd been controlling, that I'd hit her. Lies, all of it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lose my temper, but inside I was boiling. I knew her game. She was desperate, cornered, and willing to do anything to win. The judge wasn't buying her bullshit entirely. My lawyer presented the mountain of evidence: proof of the forgery, the affair, the financial irregularities. It was clear she'd been planning her move for months. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on her assets and appointed a special master to evaluate the estate. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I'd finally get some justice. But I also knew Lisa wasn't going down without a fight. She was already talking about appealing, about dragging things out forever. Throughout all this, I was still trying to keep my emotions in check. It was hard, so much anger, betrayal, heartbreak. I loved her once, or at least I thought I did. But now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd rather destroy everything than admit she made a mistake. The hardest part was knowing my kids would be caught in the crossfire. I didn't want them to grow up thinking their mother was a liar or a cheat. I wanted to protect them from the worst of it, but I couldn't shield them from the reality of what was happening. I started to realize that I couldn't fix this marriage. Not anymore. The trust was broken beyond repair. Every glance, every touch, every word from her now felt like a betrayal all over again. I knew I had to step back, focus on my kids, and rebuild my life. The fight for the estate was just the beginning. I had to prepare myself for what was coming next, more legal battles, more lies, more manipulation. But I also knew I had to stay strong, no matter how much it hurt. In the quiet moments, I'd sit alone and reflect on everything. I'd think about the woman I married, the dreams we shared, and how it all fell apart so suddenly. I'd wonder if I'd ever trust again, if I'd ever believe in love the same way. But mostly, I'd feel this burning desire to protect what's mine, my kids, my money, my reputation. I learned that some betrayals cut so deep, they threaten to destroy you from the inside out. But I also learned that if you stand your ground, you can come out stronger, even if it takes years to heal. I was determined to do just that. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Every day felt like walking through a fog of betrayal and anger. The court battles dragged on, and Lisa's attorney kept throwing everything she could think of: false accusations, delaying tactics, and even trying to claim I was unfit to have custody of the kids. It was relentless, but I had my evidence, my lawyer, and a growing sense of resolve. I knew I had to fight not just for the money or the house, but for my dignity and my kids' stability. One day, I got a call from my lawyer that shook my core. The judge was ruling in our favor: frozen assets, the house, and most importantly, a court order to prevent Lisa from selling or transferring any part of our estate without approval. Finally, I thought some justice, but the victory felt hollow. Lisa was furious. She accused me of ruining her life, of being a controlling bastard. She even tried to turn the kids against me, telling them I was some kind of monster, an evil stepfather in her twisted mind. I stayed calm, though. I knew this was her last-ditch effort to manipulate and control. I focused on my kids, making sure they knew I loved them and that I was doing everything to protect their future. I hired a child psychologist to help them navigate the chaos, and I kept them away from her drama as much as possible. It was heartbreaking to see their confusion, but I wanted to shield them from the worst of her lies. Meanwhile, I was working on rebuilding my life. I started seeing a therapist to process everything: her betrayal, the loss, the anger. It helped me gain clarity. I realized I'd spent so much time trying to fix a marriage that was beyond repair. I had to accept that I was better off without her, even if it hurt like hell. I also started focusing on my business again, making smarter investments and restoring what I'd lost financially. I knew Lisa would keep fighting, but I was determined not to let her win. One evening, I found myself sitting in my new apartment, staring at a photo of my kids. For the first time in months, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. I had lost so much, but I hadn't lost everything. I had my health, my kids, and a chance to start over. I realized I'd learned some tough lessons: trusting blindly, ignoring the red flags, and believing that marriage was enough to keep everything together. Now, I knew I had to be more cautious, more aware of the people I let into my life. The biggest lesson, though, was about betrayal. I learned that some people will do anything for money or lust, no matter how much they hurt you. I also learned that revenge isn't always about lashing out. Sometimes, it's about protecting what's yours and walking away stronger. I didn't want her to win, but I also didn't want to spend my life bitter or consumed by hatred. I wanted to move forward, rebuild, and be better. So I'm here to tell anyone who's going through something similar: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. And when you catch someone betraying you, don't let them see you break. Fight for what's rightfully yours, protect your kids, and don't be afraid to start over. It's not easy, but in the end, you come out stronger. That's the only way I know how to move on now, by facing the pain, learning from it, and making sure I never let anyone do this to me again. Looking back, I realize how much I've been through: betrayal, anger, heartbreak, and finally, a kind of hard-won clarity. Lisa's actions shattered my world, but they also forced me to see what really matters: honesty, loyalty, and protecting what's yours. I spent so many years trusting blindly, thinking marriage was enough to keep everything safe, but now I know better. Trust is earned and it's fragile. Once broken, it's almost impossible to repair, at least in my case. The legal battle drained me emotionally and financially, but it also taught me resilience. I learned that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail for what's right, even if it feels like the whole world is against you. I saw firsthand how a person can manipulate the system, lie, cheat, and do everything they can to get what they want. But I also learned that if you stay true to your principles, gather evidence, and refuse to back down, you can come out the other side stronger. My kids are my biggest motivation now. I want them to see that even when life throws you into the deepest pit of betrayal and despair, you can claw your way out. You can rebuild. They've seen their mother's true colors, but I've also shown them what integrity and strength look like. I want them to grow up knowing that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. Sometimes it's through pain, but eventually it's through perseverance. As for me, I've started to rebuild my life. I've learned to trust again, slowly, carefully, and I've realized that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on, being better, and refusing to let someone's betrayal define you. I still get angry sometimes, still replay the worst moments in my mind, but I try to focus on the future. I've come to accept that I can't control her actions, only how I respond to them. This experience has changed me forever. I'm more cautious, more aware, and more determined to protect myself and those I love. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't ignore the red flags. Don't stay in a toxic situation hopping it'll get better. And most importantly, don't let betrayal define you. You're stronger than you think. You can survive this, and you can come out the other side better than ever if you fight for it. I hope my story shows that even in the darkest moments, there's a way to find light again. Sometimes it comes from pain, and sometimes it comes from finally standing up for yourself. I've learned to do both. And now I'm ready to move forward with a clearer mind, a stronger heart, and a new understanding of what really matters in life.